one of the coolest accents ever to grace our On the Mark podcast. And he's been on here twice. And that accent you hear is from down in the bayou. Brian Manzella, welcome back to the show, mate. How are you?
Thrilled to be here, as always, Mark. Looking forward to this greatly.
Yeah, well, me too. Look, here I was. I got a few days off between broadcast assignments. I'm getting ready to podcast, and I'm scrolling through Twitter, which is sometimes dangerous.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, but fortunately for me, heaven smiled upon me, and I found your post, and you had an airplane-looking golf club, and you were describing the forces and torques on this club. And I was like, thank you, Jesus. Someone is making this stuff visual and understandable. And so I reached out, folks, to Brian, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. So for the folks listening to on audio, please look at this on YouTube, because you'll see the beautiful descriptions and visuals. Mike shows how the club moves. But Mike, before we get there,
Brian,
sorry, yeah, Brian, I'm thinking.
But Mike's the other guy. So it's Michael Jacobs and Brian Manzella. It's no problem. I had a brother that I played football, and my brother was David. And they called me David my whole life, which was fine because he was better than me.
I've got a younger brother who plays golf too, and
I've heard a rumor to that effect.
Got called Trevor once or twice. Okay, before we do that, you've been on the show twice, but for the new listeners to the show, please tell us who Brian Manzella is.
Yes, I'm a 40-year golf teacher. 40 years trying to be number one in the world. It's a hard ladder to climb out of the driving range. Let me tell you, that's where I started, at a regular public driving range. And I was there for a long time. And now I'm the 25th ranked instructor on the Golf Digest list. I've been on 6 times and 7 times on the Golf Magazine top 100 lists, and on and off for 30-something years with David Toms. They go, who's he ever taught? And then, what pertinent to today, part of the Jacobs 3D team with Michael Jacobs and Dr. Stephen Nesbitt, who, Mike, for the folks that don't know, has been working with Patty Harrington with a lot of success the last 2 years and almost a half.
And Mike has been on the show, and I called him Brian, incidentally, too. No, just kidding.
We both have really big heads.
Full of brains. Okay, so the folks know now who you are. So as a tee-up, if you go to Brian's social media, on Twitter is where I found this, you were in this darkened room. You've got this golf club that's modified, designed looking like an airplane. So I'm going to let you start there, and we're going to talk about forces and torque. So describe what you built over there, because I think the visuals are a great way to start off this conversation.
So when you're doing 3D club kinetics, which is just a fancy way of saying when you're trying to figure out when Trevor Immelman was playing his best, how he was moving this club around.
Yeah.
Right? Was he pulling it here or he pushing it here? Was it left hand, right hand, whatever? That was he twisting it? Hogan said he wished he had 3 right hands. Was he telling the truth? Nicholas felt like he did this from the top of the swing. Was this just a feel? Is feel real, right? The only way you can really do the math is the reference frame. They have to have a reference frame when they're doing the math, has to be on the club.
Yeah.
Makes sense, because, and just think of anything else. So I've done a lot of work with the Hack Motion people, the wrist sensor. That's a local reference frame too. If I cup the wrist here, it's the same cupping that I could do at the bottom or at the finish or whatever I want to do, right? So it's the same thing here. When Mike was writing his book on all this stuff, which wasn't really to explain it as much as to get it out there, he was having a tough time explaining. Now, when the club's upside down, this is positive, and when it's down here, this is. So it came to him it's like the wings of a plane and the nose of a plane, and he put these little toy planes on there. And then, I'm obsessive compulsive, so over the years, I've taped this thing up so many times you can hit balls with it. And basically, for the folks who are listening and not watching, there's an axis that runs perfectly parallel with the score lines or the leading edge of a golf club. Right. And there's one that runs across that. And then the shaft is the third one. So you hear a lot of alpha, beta, and gamma, but at the end of the day, it's along the face, across the face, and along the shaft. That's it.
So alpha is along the face.
Well, okay. So you have the plane of motion is one thing and the axis is something else, right? So if the scoreline axis is the alpha axis, so the folks watching this, it's the red straight up and down. Anything around that is alpha rotation, but it's occurring sort of on the blue plane, which is the beta plane.
Yeah.
So that's one reason why you have to have an airplane, because just that little difference between the plane of motion and the axis of rotation throws people off. It's pretty easy when you see it on the plane when we're doing something specific, like I'm sure we will do in the podcast. But when you're telling people this, you're either rotating the club by twisting on it, or you're getting some rotation from pushing and pulling on it. Now, when you push and pull on it, you also translate the club around the place. So that's how you move a golf club. And when you look at it in this airplane way, when the club flips upside down, and that's where everything would get wonky if you didn't have the plane, you can make it make sense to yourself. And those things, obviously, you go any little dime store or Hobby Lobby and buy a little plane and tape it to the club, and you've got your own little Jacobs 3D reference.
Yeah, well, look, along those lines, I've got a very simple version of what you have, but all mine is basically a long nail I had someone drill it into the club face. So this is essentially looking where the club face is going, right? And if you've got a lofted face, you can see where it's pointing. And when I put that down in front of folks and they swing up and then they swing down, and let's say they, fairly close to contact, and that red, because I painted it red, so it stands out. When it's looking well out to the right for a right-hander, it's like someone hits them in the forehead, and as if to say, well, holy cow, no wonder I'm slicing/pulling the thing.
You can see it, right? And so for the folks listening and watching, what you're talking about is like a lie angle tool, but with a bigger, right? So there is nothing with the club face in this reference frame. It would be like every club had zero loft. So the loft is like a separate. So just so if you get this right in your head, what Mark's talking about is correct. What you're talking about is a visual representation of what's called normal to the club face, which just means where the whole club face is pointing. And people think of the club face as being this leading edge, and it is sort of kind of, but when loft involved, right, it changes a lot when you change the plane. And it's an important, I suggest what you're talking about right there. Everybody who's a serious golfer should have something similar to that. And as well as having something like the airplane to understand the rest of what we're going to talk about.
That magnetic lie angle tool is like $10 on Amazon. Go and find yourself one.
Go get you one.
Now, so building from that, and I say then to people, and I'm going to let you have the microphone thereafter. I'm like, look, if that thing's talking to the golf ball, the club face, the only way you get to talk to the club face is with a handle of the golf club. And how you put force, push, pull, whatever you're talking about, how you maneuver that thing is how the club face starts to look toward and travel toward. And so now I'm going to let you have the floor, because you did a wonderful job of describing, how we propel this thing through space. So why don't you kick
So if you pick up your golf club, regular, I have a regular golf club here too. So if you pick up a regular golf club and you can balance it on your finger at what's called the balance point, right?
Yes.
So that's not quite the center of mass of the club, because the toe hangs off the shaft, but a couple of inches down from the balance point is the center of mass of the club. So when you grab something at its center, it doesn't have to be a golf club. It could be a blocking dummy. It could be an automobile. But in this case, we're talking about golf. It's the Mark Immelman Golf Podcast.
That's right.
So you grab the club at the center of mass and you push it or pull it. All that you get out of it's translation. That's it.
Yes.
But when you play golf, you grip it at a distance from this center of mass, and you get translation, and you get this, what I call blowback, just like when you watch somebody in football, right, get decleated, they're running down the field, and somebody chops them off, not in their center of mass. That's a different looking football hit, right? But at their legs, they go backwards, right? They get decleated, their feet go forward. And it's the same thing in golf. So when you take the club in front of you and you push your handle forward, like lots of people are trying to do, because John Rahm looks that way, right? They looks like he has his
and they want to swing inside out because their buddies said you're over the top.
Well, as soon as you do that, you get a little teeny weeny translation of the center of mass that way, but you get all this probably unintended angular response is the correct term, but blowback is the easy Brian term. And now you're either having to deal with this club that's now maybe too far behind your hands, or you're going to have to torque through it just to get it where it was if you wouldn't have shoved it so far. So at the end of the day, you have three things going on. You're translating the club by pushing and pulling it. That's A.
Yes.
You're getting this response from the push and pull at a distance from the mass center. That gives you some rotation, and it gives you that first thing, the translation. And then you just have the twisting. You could just twist. And the twisting we call torque, and the other one we call angular response. But at the end of the day, knowing that the golf club is responding the same way to actions that you're doing on the club, it's a whole swing thing. That's the simplification for regular people. That's why if you go to a driving range where there's 1,000 people, like Orange County National on PGA show demo day, and you had the big microphone, okay, everybody stop and listen to me, I'm king of golf. Get to your normal backswing position. Okay, great. Now, everybody looked wonderful. Now go ahead and hit 3 balls, right? And we got a TrackMan or some other unit measuring what everybody's ball went. Okay, nobody changed club. Now what we're going to do is have you try to lay the club off as much as you can. Point that thing way out that way. The ball is going to go further right as a group. Yeah, you'll have one guy out of 10 that's going to hit it further left. But the other 9 guys, right, well, maybe or gals, you're going to probably have one guy that draws it, or golfer that draws it. You'll have 1, 2, 3 that just, if they hit it on the face, they might miss it. We'll hit it just same way they always did. But 60 or 70% of them are going to turn it more right. They're going to go more right. Yeah. And if you did the same thing and you really cross the line, it's going to go left. Well, it's pretty easy to see that. And I'll talk it out for the folks who are just listening. If I go to the top of the swing, and that's my, standard Gene Littler top of the backswing position, and I just turn my body and lower the club, that club is still just up my left arm like it was at the top. Yeah. So I get a kind of a normal looking impact position. If I get the club, let's say, somewhat more between my arms, more across the line, now the club is more between my arms here, like Nicklaus wanted it to be, because he had this strong body move. He didn't want the club too far behind him. And then if you took your standard top of the backswing position and you went John Rahm or Dustin Johnson and laid it way off, well, yeah, sure, that's exactly what they look like down here. That's why they have to be so open, because technically all you've really done when you've laid the club off is lagged it more and opened it more.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of those dudes have got these big, strong, ultra flex wrists at the top to club face down. Yeah, otherwise they hit it to the right.
Exactly. And so when I wrapped my head around, however many years ago it's been, when the airplane concept came out, there was just so much stuff. I've been doing this so long. I guess it was like probably 8 years ago, 7 years ago, and 33 years of knowledge all went through a blender in my head. And when I turned the blender off, it was like it made so much more sense. This is why when David laid the club off a little bit more, the ball went right. Now I got it. I knew it I would have taken a lie detector test and said laid off goes more right, but be able to understand it made it much easier to teach. And one of the interesting things, in today's world is everybody's trying to get all this, forward lean and lay down. Well, it's the same thing. Lay down is forward lean. So that's why all of the people you see out there on the internet, teaching people to lay it down, they also teach people to lag it because, well, that is a laggy position.
Yeah.
You don't see anybody teaching massive laydowns and lining the club up like Nicklaus, because it would take a lot of work to do that.
Exactly. And for me, the thing, especially with this podcast, and everyone who's listened for a while knows this, I'm big about understanding it. That's the main thing, because if you don't, it's basically the cliche. To the sailor who doesn't know where his destination is, every wind is favorable. And most golfers, exactly, you raised it for the folks listening, Brian sitting there with his hands raised, like in the I don't know position. Most golfers are like that way. And that's where, and then the people are talking about laying it down and such, but nobody ever, and this is where you did a wonderful job with your illustration, they never describe the parameters to it. Like, how much do you lay it down, or how
and what exactly is like? So one of the things we've learned is that the concept of playing, which has helped me teach.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I got 4 TVs in here, 5 now, and a hit screen, and I'll draw a line on the screen, and this is like a normal position. When you start realizing that everything is in 3D and a line you draw on the screen is 2D, you start realizing it really doesn't mean as much as you think. It's a good reference.
Yes.
Maybe you've over-rotated or under-rotated your arms in the club at some point in the swing, and that line is a good reference, but it's not a real thing. And that's why, the trainers where you're trying to, have the little explain R&R. I'm not saying it helps nobody. It helps somebody, right? Or they wouldn't still be in business. But all of those hula hoops that were on every driving range in the world, it really didn't help people, because at the end of the day, they're just fudging all kind of other stuff just to be on that hoop, right? And if they understood that there's something you're trying to do to the golf club, you're trying to speed it up, slow it down, and square it up with some amount of loft, right, for the shot.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you kind of get the feeling for pulling and pushing and throwing, it starts making a whole lot more sense to a golfer. And one of the things, and I think that this might have been the carrot that made you call me, not that you wouldn't have anyway, haven't been on the show twice before, but we were talking about, or I was talking about in the Twitter post, but I'll put it everywhere, Instagram and on Facebook, is that this concept of the sum of the moments alpha. That sounds really esoteric, but if you just thought about getting to the top of a backswing and then rotating the club around the perpendicular to the club face axis, if you just rotate it like that. So if you got to the top,
around alpha.
Yeah. If you rotated it closed, which would just throw it across the line, if you were just statically posing your top of the backswing position, that's positive. And if you went back to your static, good top of the backswing position and you rotated it open, that's negative.
Yeah.
Michael Jacobs has been telling me I would do these Twitter, I go in gears. I got gears open right here, looking at Ian Poulter swing for a lesson. And I would take these images and I would say, look, here you are at the top, here you are at the top, and here you are, let's say, halfway to the finish. And if you take this halfway to the finish position back to the top, you can see that you've done this sort of what I call tumble.
I love you.
Right?
I wish. Wait. I need to stop. I need to stop you. Forgive me. I don't want to ruin your. For the folks listening on audio, what Mike has just shown there in the through swing.
Brian.
Oh, forgive me, Brian.
Mike told Brian but Mike taught me was this.
Listen, this is one of my best friends in instruction, but I'm losing my mind. Okay. In the through swing, Brian's got the shaft pointing back behind him like it's released. Okay. So essentially that club is rotated positive. He calls it, what is the word? You called it tumble, right?
Yeah. Well, I've already tumbled it to get to this position.
Yeah. Now, to get it to that position, folks, from the top of the backswing, he has to essentially throw the club head across the line, and everyone who's trying to shallow the thing is having their eyes spout blood right now. Go, you can have it.
So I would put up an image like that. I would take the two images. I would take just the arms of the swivel, you know, the halfway through position back on plane.
Yeah.
And I'd throw that in gears. There's these little reference frames through different body parts. And the chest is a good one to use. And I would throw this position, the fully swiveled through the ball position, on top of the backswing, and you could see the difference between the two clubs. And Mike would always tell me, yeah, some of the moments alpha is always positive from the top. And I swear to you, I know what it meant, but it didn't mean anything to me until I learned the simple way to describe some of the moments alpha is if you've got, we're just talking about this perpendicular axis right now. So if I push the club forward,
yes,
that made the club go, I pushed the handle forward, that made the club head go back. You could do that, folks, from any position. You could go to address, push the handle forward. The whole club moves a little bit forward.
But the head goes behind the hands.
The head goes backwards. Okay.
Yeah.
So the two ways to rotate the club is pushing it and pulling it, because you're doing it at a distance from the mass center, and rotating it just by rotating it. So if I just push my hands forward, that made the alpha rotation negative. If I did nothing else, the sum of those two moments, which just means rotations or rotators,
yeah,
is negative. So that means that from the top of the swing, you're trying to tumble it. Everybody. Like I asked Mike, I went like, what level is the cutoff? Right? Is it the people that can't play at all? Like I just had a raw beginner in here, you know, just shanking balls all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe he's not doing it. No, he says, we got 3,100 swings in the system. Nobody is negative in transition. Now, I looked at Matt Wolff, somebody put up a Matt Wolff swing.
And again, once again, negative in transition.
Okay. So if you had some of the moments alpha negative in transition, you would be actively trying to lay the club down.
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, now I don't have Wolff. We don't have Wolff in 3D. And his swing is very unusual, where even Miller Barber and the other guys, they cheated a little bit late. You know, Furyk, they cheated late backswing. Matt Wolff, at least the one I saw, I don't know if he always swung this way, there was nothing going negative until he looked like he changed directions. Now, maybe he's still trying to rotate it that way, but nobody listening is swinging like Matt Wolff. So that means the punchline of this, some of the moments alpha craziness, is that everybody, even the folks who are actually laying the club down, are actively trying not to, whether they know it or not. Now, Nicklaus described it to Mike Malaska. Mike Malaska told me the story, told me and Michael Jacobs the story. They were at a golf school. You know, obviously he worked for Nicklaus Flick Golf Schools. Mm-hmm. And obviously it was a VIP school because Mr. Nicklaus was there, okay? And at least for the cocktail party. And apparently there was a guy, anytime you do a golf school, there's going to be one guy or gal that needs to like release it sooner, right? Yeah. For lack of a better term. So that person and Malaska were talking, and the guy said, yeah, I was very surprised at how much better I hit it trying to throw it right away. And so Mike was going, that's right, Mark. You had to throw it right away. And I'm going to tell you, for the people watching, I'm throwing it sort of in the direction of my thumb from the top. And that's what Malaska was demonstrating, like just taking the club head and making it go away from my hands, like uncocking my wrists. Mm-hmm. And Jack was, sipping a little cocktail. He sees this and goes, well, what are you doing? Oh, Jack, I'm telling Mark over here, he needed to get that thing going sooner. And Jack goes, I never did this. I did this.
Really?
So
for the listeners, he's tumbling the shaft over. He's tumbling the shaft over there.
Yeah. So one of the things that's been great, and this is when I knew our stuff was right. is it made every great player and teacher in history correct. Every single thing that everybody's ever said was right. Hogan, you wish he had 3 right hands. Well, who had a better pivot than Ben Hogan? So he needed 3 right hands to torque through all the drag he had. Yeah. Right? Nicholas felt like yes, Jack did. He tumbled it. He tried to tumble it. So instead of like saying, oh, Trevor Immelman thought he did that, he doesn't know. That's just a feel. No. What you're doing to the club is real. If it feels like you're pulling on it one way, you're pulling on it one way. I've never seen anybody get captured where Mike ran their swing through the software and they just not say, yeah, that's exactly what it feels like. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, I want to say this. Well, first off, like I was in an airplane, I always am every week, and we were taking off in mist. And I'm looking out the window there, and you could see first off, the vortex of the air being sucked into the engines and above the wing and below the thing. And I'm like, yeah, plane takes off because of lift and drag, right? And the thrust, you get more lift than the drag. And when you get that environment, the plane flies. I don't care how, if you don't have that, the plane's not going to fly. And when you talk about this kind of thing, and you talk about handle pulling, if you're pulling like that, you have to square the club face up. And the problem is most folks then don't tumble the shaft early enough. Then they fall back to give themselves time, or they make some sort of an accommodation. Secondarily is a lot of the tumble they might see, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, is because they're originating that with their shoulders and their upper body, and not necessarily where you're showing more down forearms, wrists kind of environment. Am I wrong?
Well, just think about this. So gamma, not to throw all the terms in there, but gamma is the long axis of the shaft, okay? Twisting the shaft about itself. That's all gamma is. A normal iron top of the swing is gamma rotated 100 degrees open. So you could make a perfect golf swing, and you can rotate it 90 degrees, which is a big percentage. That sounds good in baseball or shooting 3-pointers in basketball. 90% of the gamma is there, and you can't finish the golf round because if you had a square path and a 10-degree open face, you can't play golf.
Yeah.
You can't finish. You can't aim left enough. You can't do that. So what happens to people who come over the top and say, this hacker's tumbling it. I don't know what that Manzella guy is saying. They don't know how to twist it square. They don't know how to twist it square, so they're tumbling it because they're trying to square it up the only other way they can. Mm-hmm. That's your only 2 choices. Once somebody's got a reasonable grip, which just means you're giving them more twist leverage. A good left-hand grip is just more leverage to twist it, and a stronger grip is even more leverage to twist it, and you don't let them open the club 140 degrees on the backswing, those people generally won't come over the top anymore. They generally do because they need to. But most good players, I would say 90% of the lessons I've given in 40 years to people who can beat me, that's a decent amount of people. I'm still a halfway decent little player for a once-a-week golf teacher. They were below plane, so they didn't have enough of it. At the end of the day, they had so much pull and drag that they didn't have enough, some of the moments alpha positive, tumble to make up for that. And then they got all kind of problems. Then they're swinging 6 degrees inside out, and they got a 2-way miss. And Bruce Litsky never had a 2-way miss. All the people with 2-way misses are below. Yeah. They're under. There's no over guys that have 2-way misses.
Well, one of the best strikers I've ever seen play, I mean, he was a hitter, is David Duval. And he said to me point blank categorically, he goes, I'm trying to get the thing on top of the plane on the way down as much as I possibly can. Because from there, you talk about there's the alpha force and then there's the gamma force. Then you can start to turn the corner a little bit with the thing on the way through and not worry about the ball, making a beeline off to the weak or right-handed side for a right-hander.
But just think about if you said David Duval, like as a word association game with a knowledgeable golf person, doesn't have to be somebody who gives lessons all day like me.
Let's say shut face.
You say, who's the guy? Oh yeah, but okay. But if you said, okay, describe his body.
Yeah.
He's so open at impact. and he's reasonably turned at the top. I know he kind of restricted his lower body turn a little bit, but so he made a big turn on the backswing, and he's measurably more open and impact in his prime than your brother was.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what does that mean? He's turning faster than your brother was. So he had to tumble it harder, and he still didn't tumble it enough to do anything but hit basically a low fade. That was his shot, right? Mm-hmm. I remember the first shot I ever saw him hit here in New Orleans. It was about 40 degrees, and the wind was about 15 in his face. And I think it was his first year on tour, and he hit it about 300 yards on number 10. And I went, who in the hell is that? It was a bullet, right? I mean, he was people just don't remember how good he was. And every time I've ever heard him talk about what he felt like he was doing, knowing the truth about what people actually do to the club, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's. I know you've probably got lessons waiting, and I've got commitments too. You've talked about alpha and the tumble, and most folks don't do that early enough. And if you tumble it positive, you can rotate harder. So there's this relationship where the rotation or the force driven by the body, the more you tumble it, the more you can work, and they help each other. Let's talk about folks who tend to want to like pull on the handle outward or downward. Talk more about the beta arrangement with a club too.
So so let's go back a half a piece here. So Brian, I'm the person listening out there. You're saying everybody is doing the actively trying to delay the club off at the top, go the opposite way.
Yes.
Why do people still lay the club down? Because they're pulling so damn hard that it blows back that way. Yeah. They're still trying to. So one of the people, when I was going to do that video, is Sergio. How does Sergio have so much? Well, he takes the club out a little, and then he flops it over his shoulder late. So he throws so much negative, so much laid off reverse tumble or flop, I call it. He throws so much flop into the late backswing that he's trying to stop the flop, and it's winning, just like me and you are trying to stop your car from ice on the driveway, going down the driveway. When we first start pushing on the car's probably going to win, exactly. And then we're going to get it to zero, and we're going to push it back up the hill. So Sergio is super negative late backswing. He's trying to tumble it, and all of a sudden go, boy, he has a marvelous tumble, the best looking one probably in golf history, because he was trying to tumble it late backswing. He just made a backswing that made that work for what he was doing. But he'll report to you that the predominant feeling he had wasn't any of that. His daddy, who I met when I did a golf clinic in Spain for their PGA, he was trying to pull on the club down. So that's where all of that came from. He put that club in a position, late backswing, so he could blend that into that pull down. And what he figured out, totally probably subconsciously, but if I told him all of this, he would probably say, yep, I do that, is that he could balance it all out if he got on top of it early, and that's what he did. So what people need to understand, to your question, is if they're trying to make their hands go out, this is a popular thing on the Instagram tour, right? Let's get the hands to go way out, because that will make the club yaw backwards and have that magic laydown. Yeah. You're going to be doing the torque in the other direction harder. So it's not, I'm not saying it wouldn't work for anybody, but of all the things that you probably can't tell everybody listening to this podcast that's going to work for them, is go to the top of the swing and pull like crazy with everything you have, and pull your hands far out toward the target line right away. That would be a recipe to make a bunch of shankers. Well,
I've lived this for all of my golf playing life, and I see pictures. I'm looking in the camera, and my lead arm, my left arm's up, and my right elbow's way underneath. Where do you think I hit the golf ball to most of my career? Right side, huh?
Right, absolutely.
And then I see pictures of Rory where on halfway down, it's almost like his right elbow looks above the left, And this blew my mind all the time, because remember how, the Hogan image is the elbow tucked in the side and the elbow's underneath the lead elbow. Well, I copied that and I never got the thing around. Okay.
Nope.
But Rory is a little bit more the other way. And then almost it's like he's getting into where everyone talks about, you talk about your run and
Pull up, run up, jump.
Yeah.
He does it unbelievably good. Yes.
Well, it's like he goes downhill and that elbow's up. So he's tipped the shaft, even though it doesn't look tipped. And
It's
then from there you can let it go, huh?
His golf swing's fascinating because he's piddled with it so much and he really hasn't had to, right?
Yeah.
And I know, from working with tour players and great players, everybody's always trying to get better. And like when he had that really disastrous PGA at Kiwa, the last time they played Kiwa in the PGA, and they said, well, you won here the last time. What was all I had to do was aim at the ocean. I knew the ball was coming back. Yeah. And so it's I just really don't think he understands his swing or has any earthly idea. Maybe nobody, it's like a pretty girl that nobody ever tells them they're pretty because you're scared to, because it's so darn obvious that you feel like you're going to be an idiot if you say, you're a pretty lady. Rory, your swing as is fine, bro. You should have won 10 more majors. Stop messing with it and just figure out what it is you do when you're playing good, and just do that. And he's a swing that I don't see a lot of folks on the social media saying you should copy him. He would be, for a young guy, a much better copy than some random guy just because he's got to lay down an extra leg.
Yeah, it's crazy. Hey, this has been great. I wish I could keep you for longer. But I want to direct people to you and to your social media, please, Brian. So please share the handles and the website and whatever way they can find you.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Twitter is at Brian Manzella, and I think it's the same on Instagram. And then me and Michael Jacobs have a Facebook group. All you have to do is ask for an invite. We just click approve if you don't look like a bot. And I'm sure all you great listeners out there of the On the Mark podcast are not bots. Postmodern Golf is our little home on Facebook. And there, the thing about Postmodern, if you're interested in this stuff that we've been fortunate enough to get from Stephen Nesbitt, the software, is we've got a ton of that in the archives there. So if you really want to look at a couple of graphs and graphics and images and stuff, you can on Postmodern Golf, and ask us any question you want. The one thing that I would tell people about all of this is it sounds complicated.
Yeah.
And it's scary. It's not. it's you just have to sort of like, what's one piece I could take from this? So I'll give you one piece if you got time.
Sure. Yes.
You want to shove those hands forward? You're going to have to either twist the club close or you're going to have to throw it double. So that's an important thing, because I used to shove it twice as much forward as I do now. So I have to torque through it half as much. So if you watch the 61-year-old version of Brian Manzella, the swing looks smoother than the 41-year-old version, but the ball goes the same distance.
Exactly.
The club head speed is the same. The ball might go further, but the club head speed is the same. So if you understand how all this works, you can fix yourself a little bit better. And then you can also look for teachers that can help you with it. And it's not scary. It's the truth.
Please, would you keep bringing the truth, keep preaching the truth, my friend. I know it gets, I know you've gotten into one or two social media spats, but what you're doing is so appropriate, and it doesn't seem to jive with people's understanding. And maybe it's not so sexy, but the math of it, the mechanics of it, the physics of it, it's also appropriate.
I've lost 2 golf swing arguments in my life, and I'm going to tell you exactly what they were. I thought maximum trigger delay was good. It's not.
Yeah.
All right, so I lost that one, and I kind of taught more right lean and backswings 20 years ago than folks like Andy Plummer have kind of moved the industry more to centered. Other than those 2, I'm undefeated, so I ain't worried about losing this one.
I was the guy that taught folks to get too far right, or for not maybe too far right, but just for too long. They're not
too long. Yep. And it's hard to tumble it from under.
No, yes, you're looking at him.
Preach it to the choir.
Brian, you're a superstar.
Great to be on the show. Great to be on the show.